Hello again. I'm back with another video talk, and this is basically a continuation of my last talk in which I described a few differences between information and knowledge. This talk is also a part of the Facebook group activity, the CBT group, Cognitive Behavior Therapy group. And in the group, we are discussing the differences between information and knowledge. Uh, I present different scenarios from real life, from the media, and we discuss them, and then I summarize them as a Facebook post, and I also sum those points up in a video format. And the reason I do this in a video format is because not everybody is available in the group to read the posts, and so these video clips come handy for them, and also because I want to put these videos on YouTube so other people can also benefit from them. So let's continue. So just to recap the the prominent or important features of the talk from last time, information is basically anything and everything that goes into our brain in any form from any source. So whatever you read, whatever you hear, see, whatever you smell, whatever happens during an interaction, all that is basically information for us. And different types of information, they come from different sources. We are basically talking about the academic information, so that's why I'm going to highlight some aspects, some sources of academic or so-called academic information. Social media, you'll see posts, you'll see discussions, you'll see expert clips, you'll see people who are known as experts in certain fields. They'll be posting things. So that's one important source of information. In terms of television, there are tens of channels. There are news channels where they'll call experts, they'll talk about certain things, about economy, about psychology, health, medical illnesses, all that. That's basically another source. Then you read information in the newspaper about the policies, about the prevalence, about the incidents, about drug shortages, all that. Again, it's information. Then you read books, textbooks, other types of books, and you read medical and journals, scientific journals. And finally, you have lectures and live interactions. All these are basically information. In aggregate, only a fraction of all this information is true knowledge. And as I explained in my last talk, knowledge is a piece of information whose truth has been justified through objective evidence or infallible argumentation. So if you read something on social media or if you watch something on television where the person maybe he's an expert or he is known expert and he talks about and gives his opinion, that's not knowledge. Because knowledge has to have data, knowledge has to have information that you can evaluate, that you can assess. So if someone talks about numbers and data and how they reach certain conclusions, that's a better source of information because you can assess it for its truth. But if someone is simply telling you, oh, look, this is this and this is that, that's only opinion. And the opinion is the crudest form of information. I realized that it's easier for me to explain these points in developed countries because academicians in these countries know this, as compared to developing countries, because in developing countries, students or trainees are not taught in colleges and in schools. So they don't necessarily have this understanding. I promise you that you will have a better understanding if you watch these video clips and if you participate in Facebook activities on a regular basis. Facebook group activities, the CBT group activities. Now, when we are exposed to so much information, the challenge is how to extract knowledge out of that information. How do you know that what information truly stands the criteria and the standards of knowledge. So in this slide, I'm going to highlight 5 important aspects and explain things through those aspects. First of all, you need to understand that information can be very simple to highly complex. So simple information, an example would be you ask someone what is his or her name, and the person says, and it's him, so he says, my name is John. That's very simple piece of information. So you say, okay, John, nice to meet you. So you trust John. He gave you a piece of information. You trust him enough to take it as a piece of knowledge. And now you have this knowledge that this person is John. But how would you know that that person is John if that person, you didn't have a face-to-face interaction, and or even if you had a face-to-face interaction and you really didn't trust that person, or you were doubtful that this person is telling you the right name. Or on a social media, if someone sends you a friend request and the name is John, how do you really know that this person's name is John? This may be misinformation or disinformation, or this person may be just using 4 different names to be on Facebook. So now if you know the person from school, somebody you knew him for years, and now you get back in touch with each other and you see his photo, you would know this person is John. So you basically used his photo to identify that this is John. And this is what happens at airports. So you go on, and the person who is checking you in, they can see your name on the boarding pass, but they don't trust you. So they need evidence for it. So you show a government issued ID, and they look at it, they look at you, and they say, yeah, that's fine. So now they trust you. And this is how we differentiate between information and knowledge. And this was a very, very basic, simple example. Now, take an example of something complex. Say you read a scientific study. So read a scientific paper. How do you really assess that this piece of information is worth knowledge? Because when we talk about scientific journals, there is a range of journals. Some are very low quality, some are very high quality, and many fall in between. So if you're reading something in a very low quality journal, the first question that should come to your mind, why are you reading it? Because anybody that's getting their stuff published in such a low quality journal, if it was such a good quality research, wouldn't they have gotten it published in a good quality journal? So you're deliberately exposing yourself to poor quality information. Now, because most people in developing countries have never been taught how to assess the quality of journals, they wouldn't know. So they'll pick up a journal, read an article in it, and just because it's published in a medical journal or scientific journal, they'll trust it. So complex information needs much more than showing a photo ID to get validated. And that brings me to the tools part. So there are tools that one can use to establish the truth of the information, to categorize it as knowledge. So I gave you an example of photo ID. That's a simple piece of information. You need a simple tool to verify it. But if you're talking about a scientific paper that you just read, and you really don't know the quality of the journal, now you are stuck with needing a lot of tools to assess the quality of the paper that you read. And that's why you not only need to have the tools, but you have to have the expertise and skills to use the available tools. And I usually give the example of a recipe to explain. I used to give that example to my students here, that trying to differentiate between information or extract information, knowledge out of whatever information you are exposed to is like preparing a very fine quality recipe. You need to know its ingredients, which will be the tools, and you need to know how to mix and prepare those ingredients to turn it into that fine recipe. And that will be your expertise of using those tools. So as an academician, you have to develop those tools. If you don't develop them, you will not teach them to your students, and your students will be deprived of those tools and skills as well. And this cycle keeps repeating itself in the developing countries. And that's why developing countries, they lag behind when it comes to global indices about science and innovation and discovery, because they don't have those tools. And my effort is that to develop probably 10, 20, 30, to get them to a few academicians together who are interested in self-education. I'll help with the process, and then they can develop those tools and they can start imparting them to their trainees. We also need to understand that information is on a continuum. Now there is a lot of disinformation out there. Disinformation is wrong or dishonest information that is being put out there deliberately. It may be put out there for political reasons, for religious reasons, for business reasons, for other reasons, just to draw some personal interests and gains. Then there is misinformation, which means that the information is still not reliable, but it has been put out without any bad intention. So somebody who doesn't have the knowledge, who doesn't have skills, who doesn't have expertise, they come on a channel, they give out talks, they talk as they are experts, they give big statements, they give big descriptions. All that is basically, they don't have the background, they won't present the data, they won't present how they assess that information. And so we get tons of misinformation, especially on social media and in common media. Then comes a better quality information. So as we move from red to yellow to green, that improves the quality of information. So we get credible information, meaning that you know that the person who is describing it is really a known expert. He's presenting some data, he's telling how this information was extracted, he's describing the tools that were used for this information. So you start trusting that person, and that's how that information starts giving you a flavor of being credible. Then you use your own tools and your own expertise, and you assess it, and you determine whether that credible information qualifies as knowledge or not. Now, we will continue to discuss these things with real examples, especially in the Facebook CBT group. And so don't be scared that how are you going to develop these tools. Continuing with extraction of knowledge from information, there are modifiers and influences that we have to keep in mind, because all humans tend to pile up information in their heads. All the information we pile up is not necessarily knowledge. In fact, most of it is not knowledge, because we are exposed to so much of misinformation and poor quality information and disinformation, and that goes into our brains as well. And that creates biases and certain vulnerabilities in us. We have to be very mindful of them. First of all, we have to be mindful of the credibility of the source. So I'll explain this to you through certain organizations and scientific journals down the road. But the point here is that you have to have a credible source. Credible source, and that's why I have underlined the word source, does not mean the information is necessarily credible as well, because the source may have vested interest, the source may have done a sloppy job in assessing that piece of information or doing that piece of research. So you have to use your own skills and tools to assess that piece of information. Next is that you have to be mindful of cognitive biases. And we have talked about, I mentioned a couple of them, I think authority bias and confirmation bias in a couple of Facebook posts. But we'll go through those biases, the main ones, down the road. Then you have to be mindful of your emotional factors, because we are emotional beings. We are driven by emotions. So anything that appeals to us emotionally, we will get attracted to it, whether it's a research, whether it's a belief, whether it's a piece of information, and we'll immediately jump to it as if it's credible. So we have to be mindful of it. Because our emotions then will tint our cognition and create cognitive bias on top of the emotional factors. And finally, we have to develop analytical and critical skills. And we have to keep developing them, and we have to keep refining them. And for example, when I've been reviewing for journals for over 20 years. So when I review for journals, that keeps my skills polished. And in fact, because the journals I review for, they usually have 3 or 4 or 5 reviewers for each article, and they share the feedback of all reviewers with all the reviewers. When I read the comments from other reviewers, that gives me an opportunity to learn. And if some reviewers have made some excellent points, I will wonder how I missed those. So academicians, that's how academicians stay up to date in terms of their capabilities and their tools and their expertise. Now, this ends the talk here, and I'll see you with my next talk in a couple of weeks. Thank you.